Okay, so next up, as you may know and have seen on the logotype of 23C3, you'll find that the logotype, one of the elements is an apple. And if you don't already know that this apple is representative of, this is the apple of Discordia. And I have a ThinkPad of Discordia, and I know a lot of you have an apple of Discordia. But really, what is Discordianism? And we have a guest here named Autumn, who runs Discordian.com, and she will be talking with us, with Fox, her partner. They're going to talk about culture jamming and Discordianism, and essentially the movement of Discordianism and pranksters throughout history, and how the prankster has become the prophet in some ways. And so could you please give a warm welcome to Autumn and Fox.
Hi, everybody. If you're wondering why I'm alone on stage, that's because my co-presenter did all of our fabulous visual aids. I can assure you if I was the one doing them, they would be like a third as cool. So you can thank him for that. And there we go. So I'd like to start out by showing one of the original myths of Discordianism. Now, Discordianism, as you may know, is somewhere between a joke and a religion, but it does have a myth system. So we put together a little presentation for you. It's called The Original Snub. Now, this is a wedding invitation list. There was a wedding going on in ancient Greece between Peleus and Thetis, two nobles. And they invited all of the gods that were available, and a few other people, you'll notice. But they neglected to invite Eris. Now, you might notice Steve Jobs had the grace to go off and find himself a party somewhere, but Eris said, forget that. Eris wanted to go to this wedding and was a little bit upset, as you might be, to find that all of her friends were invited, but she was not. You'll see her looking very sad here. Now, these other goddesses put on a big show preening about how they were invited, and Eris was not so fond of this. So she had a bright idea. She knew that the gods had egos well beyond their actual godly stature. And so she got a golden apple and inscribed with it the word Callisti, which means for the prettiest one, and rolled it into the hall of this wedding. All of the gods said, that's mine, that's mine. Now, you might expect if somebody leaves a beautiful piece of gold at a wedding that maybe it's for the bride. But in this case, the gods said, no, it must be mine because I'm the prettiest one here. Forget you guys. Well, as we all know, the father of the gods was Zeus. And Zeus did not want to piss off any one of these fine ladies. So Zeus wasn't going to say, well, it's yours, and risk the wrath of the other two. So Zeus did something a little tricky. He passed the responsibility off to Paris, the Prince of Troy, a mortal. And, you know, hey, it's a mortal, who cares, right? And so he said, Paris is going to choose who to give this apple to tomorrow. And of course, the goddesses are all sneaky, and they came to him in the middle of the night and they offered him things. Hera offered him dominion over the world. She offered him much of Asia, in fact. Athena offered him wisdom of the ages, knowledge far beyond mortal means. And Aphrodite offered him the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, as mortal men are wont to fail, that's who he chose. Hello. Okay, and we see that Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world, was in fact already married to the king of Sparta, Troy's biggest enemy. Well, the rest is history. Here we see the Trojan War. And this was what started it all. What we can take from this in Discordianism and culture jamming is that this never would have been a problem if the gods had said, well, hey, this is clearly a wedding gift, we'll give it to the bride. The problem was that their egos far exceeded anything that could have gone on in that room. And thus, the original snub was born. So today, I'm going to give a talk about Discordianism and culture jamming, and I'm going to go with the model of the Discordian seasons. The Discordian seasons are sort of phases of society, right? First, there's chaos, where there's just no rules at all. And then we move into discord, where there's still no rules, but people are starting to get a little upset about that, because, well, something's happening and you don't like it, and maybe there should be a law. And then we move into confusion, as some rules start to take effect, but nobody is sure where to follow the rules or what rules to follow. And then into bureaucracy, where this is all strictly codified. We have 5 rules and you cannot break them. And then to the aftermath, when finally we move beyond categories. So in chaos, we're going to talk about Discordianism. First, I'll give you a little bit of a biography, just a 2-second word. I run Discordian.com. I've been involved in various prankster organizations such as the Cacophony Society for a fairly long time. My co-presenter here likes to come with me to a number of these events. He's a former administrator for a harm reduction board called bluelight.new, if some of you are familiar with it. And not only that, but he's also done most of the art for my website and for this presentation. Lastly, I need to give a disclaimer. I'm American. A lot of these examples are American because I'd like to tell you what I know about as opposed to what I don't. I did do some research on this, but I figured it's better to talk about what I know best. Not only that, but I tried to give a more Discordian focus to this talk, so there's a number of people and groups and events that are incredibly fascinating in the world of culture jamming, but I wasn't able to get to them because I was trying to keep this a more narrow focus. Now, Discordianism started with 2 crazy hippies hanging out in a bowling alley in the middle of the night in Los Angeles in 1959 or 1958. They can't remember. And they said, hey, I heard about this ancient Greek goddess of chaos. Wouldn't it be funny if somebody started a religion? Well, thank goodness it didn't turn into Scientology. But instead, we have something a little bit stranger. Now, the 2 guys that started this, Kerry Thornley and Gregory Hill, both of whom went on to have fascinating careers in the arts and all sorts of places. Well, all sorts of places is interesting. Kerry Thornley, this is a little tidbit, was actually mistaken for Lee Harvey Oswald during the Kennedy assassination. So we found this lovely cover of the original Principia Discordia, the writing from Discordian Society, in the Kennedy archives. I find that fascinating. So the 2 of them wrote this book. And it's a collection of essays and random parables and pieces of art. They offered pope cards to suggest that everyone who has one of these cards is in fact a pope. That is, someone who's under their own authority. And in fact, if you're interested, I've got a few. Then, a few years down the line, some of the crazy people they were hanging out with wrote a book. Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea wrote the Illuminatus trilogy and its follow-up, the Schrodinger's Cat trilogy. 2 large works of bizarre fiction. They go through memos, they go through politics, magic, sex, all kinds of things that were coming up in the 1970s. And really, the Illuminatus trilogy is what's popularized Discordianism to where it is today. Sorry about this. This runs a little slow. I know you guys all like free software. Well, I got free hardware. Okay. One of the biggest follow-ups to Discordianism was the Church of the Subgenius. And if you've ever heard of Slack or Reverend Ivan Stang, there's this whole group of people that put on what they call devivals, essentially parodies of Christian revivals, where people run around dancing naked and talking about how the aliens are going to come down and make it all better. They're good people, and they've influenced a number of people, including artists Negativland, that we're going to talk about later in this presentation. So the current state of Discordianism today is largely online. You can see things like Alt Discordia or PrincipiaDiscordia.com or the live journal Discord Society, where most of what's happening in Discordianism today is online conversations. People have conversations on everything from esoteric philosophy to bizarre politics to really what they ate for dinner yesterday. It's a little bit like blogging. There are, however, a couple of actual gatherings in person. The biggest one is the Free Spirit Gathering. While not explicitly Discordian, it's a large pagan festival where people, again, come dance around naked around fires. I guess that's a big thing. And they have a Discordian programming tract. Then in February of every year, there's a large pagan convention in the San Francisco Bay Area called PantheaCon. There are several people who present Discordian ritual there every year. I'm one of them. And then lastly, there is the Discordian convention that I host every year. I've been doing that for the past 5 years. It's kind of like having 20 of your strangest house guests for a weekend. It's a whole lot of fun. We do ritual and I'll get into that in a moment. But we also sit around singing bizarre campfire songs, make up games, and have occasional public events. Now I'd like to talk about the more occult aspects of this. A long, long time ago in the 1600s, the Rosicrucians published this manifesto talking about the Rosicrucian Society and how it was full of bright, intelligent, fabulous people. And then suddenly everybody was a Rosicrucian. One of the things that we see in culture jamming and in Discordianism is this doctrine of build it and they will come. This idea that when we talk about some fabulous organization, simply by talking about it, people will want to join, and then we'll tell you that they've joined. And then suddenly your organization exists. Now, more recently, we can see some work in Discordianism that descends from Aleister Crowley's work, which talks about the will as the supreme force, and Phil Hine and Austin Osman Spare and a number of other theorists who write things about chaos magic. Now, what's interesting about this is that I'd like to give you a more utilitarian version of this. I would like to define magic as a symbolic act undertaken to effect change. So this isn't always somebody who even believes in some bizarre supernatural forces, so much as somebody who is working with a symbol in order to effect change. So we'll see that as we see people trying to deconstruct and reconstruct corporate logos. And that is, in fact, a form of magic. Now, those who engage in chaos magic do something similar. Chaos magic says that belief itself is powerful, and it's sort of like a brain hack. Like if you believe in something so strongly, you're more likely to have a chance of actually being able to accomplish this. And so what they do is they choose a system to believe in order to get these results, and then when it becomes inconvenient, laugh it off. So for example, we've all heard of various gods in mythology, and some of them are better at some things than others. So if you strongly need emotional healing, maybe you would pray to Jesus. Jesus is pretty good at that. But then if you need to go get laid, Jesus is not your man. So the next person you might talk to would be maybe Pan. There's a group of people called the Z Cluster who've done a lot of chaos magic rituals, including most notably a Elvis resurrection ritual, where they attempted to resurrect the spirit of Elvis. Now, again, nobody expected the king to come walking up from under the grave, but I guess they all had a little bit of extra swing in their step. Now let's move into Discord. And here's where I'm going to talk about culture